My name is Gina Clark and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Fintech Times. And today I'm hosting this webinar for the Power 50. The Fintech Power 50 is an annual guide to the most influential, innovative and powerful figures in the fintech industry. It acts as a much needed reminder of all the great things we're achieving in the world of financial technology and shines a spotlight on those who are transforming financial services for the better. Now, today I've got two guests. Joanne Dewar is the Chief Executive Officer of Global Processing Services, a proven go-to payments processing partner for today's leading challenger banks, including Revolut, Starling Bank and Curve. Also joining me is Sam Seaton, the CEO of MoneyHub, the market-leading open finance platform for customer-centric organisations and at the industry forefront for financial data aggregation, intelligence and payments. Welcome both of you. I think it's a really interesting topic that we're talking about today. So as a bit of a background, only 30% of the fintech workforce is made up of women, and that figure drops when we're talking about fintech leaders to just 17%. So I think it might be good maybe to kick off and ask you both, why do you think there's such a lack of women at the top of fintech? Jo, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, look, there's so many different reasons. You know, both in terms of in tech in particular, there's a challenge all the way through, and then in leadership generally across all industries, there's challenges. So you bring those two together, fintech or technology leadership, and you've really got a very small cohort, and it's a crying shame because those that are around are demonstrating that they are sort of both incredibly talented, but also very strong leaders with, often quite sort of progressive leadership approaches that, are really beneficial to the industry and the wider world. So desperate to try and help make a difference. In our organization, I'm pleased to report we're sort of not on those stats, helped by the fact that, not only having me as a female CEO, but we've got a very sort of specific agenda on diversity, inclusion and belonging, crucially. So we've got 40% of our wider leadership team are female, and it's about 35% across the organization. And interestingly, we run inductions on a monthly basis for our new joiners, and of the 9 that started this week, 8 were women. So that was really interesting. So
the majority, excellent. And Sam, what's it been like from your point of view?
So it is really tough, actually. Whenever we hire developers, engineers of any kind, it's very difficult to find female engineers. So I would say they're as rare as hen's teeth, is what the saying goes. And I'd love to think they're not, but they are. And what do I think it's all about? I actually think it's 2 key things. I think it's the lack of role models and the lack of what financial services as an industry does. So if you look at the medical world, they've definitely cracked. The doctors being more, being as, many females as men. And actually, although some of the consultants at the top levels, that's not the case, that's because actually they're still coming through. But it's not going to, you can see it's not going to be that long before it's potentially even more women doctors than male. So they've cracked it. But I've thought about that a bit. And I thought, why haven't we cracked it? What's stopping us? And I thought, well, I think it's because financial services is so broad. Whereas if you train to be a doctor, you train to be a doctor. And although that does actually have lots of, options after that, you start off by going to do a course as a doctor, don't you? And it's not how financial services works. You can start in asset management, you can start in the advice world, there's so many places you can start. And then unfortunately for all of those areas, if you look at those businesses, there aren't enough role models, I think, in place, and probably people like Joanna and I that can actually genuinely hang on to enable more women to be welcome in our organisations. So I think it does get hindered from that lack of women at the top.
I think as well, you know, the burden of care that women face these days, does it make positions at the top inaccessible, would you say, or is it hindering? Obviously it's hindering, but can it be overcome, I guess is the question. Jo, do you want to say that one?
So yeah, I mean, there's many options on how to be able to balance childcare and a career, but they're not often spoken about. And so I think, you know, for those that are making those decisions, you know, in their late 20s, early 30s, it's, you know, when you can't see the potential options, then you make assumptions around, you know, well, you have to stop work to have a family, or maybe you're just, you know, on maternity leave, and it just looks like you either stop or you're, you know, full blown back to the work, and, you know, it's external childcare support, and there's nothing in between. Whereas actually there's a whole spectrum of options in between, but we don't spend enough time sort of sharing those examples to be able to help people recognise that there are more choices there that may actually help people maintain a balance over time. And it may well be that you don't achieve everything from a personal and family perspective and a career perspective in the same moment in time, but you can actually sort of explore your life in chapters a bit more. And one of the things is, you know, I'm sort of a proponent of is, and an example of, is returnships, and the ability, even after a significant period out of the workforce, if we can create the right structures, support structures, both in the workplace and in the childcare support to enable returnships, there's an ability to be able to help people back into the workforce after a leave of absence.
And Sam, what are your thoughts?
So I think it's got to be about flexibility, and I really hope that with the pandemic that we've just been through globally, we might have actually cracked that finally, because I've always been a huge advocate that it doesn't matter where you do your work from. I think this idea that people are more productive in an office, I really think is flawed. And I know people will argue till the cows come home. And I've even been fed back stats that I'm incorrect and we're 25% more productive. But what my challenge to that is that that to me just says that the environment isn't right. There's no reason people can't be as productive at home as they are in the office. And if we want to keep people through those chapters that Joanne was just, you know, mentioning, I think we have to be willing to go there. And to give an example, so we had our QA lead, she explained to her line manager that she needed to go part-time because her husband was going to be away, and she needed to do more of the, you know, take more responsibility for the children than they'd be, you know, she'd been able to share with her husband. And so I got asked in some management meeting, you know, was it all right for, you know, her to go part-time, and how would we manage that? And then I just went back and said, well, are you sure she wants to go part-time? I mean, could she just work flexible hours? I mean, you know, that suit her. She's got 2 young children, maybe once, and her husband's away now, so that's why she's got all this responsibility during the week. And maybe she would like to stop at 3 and start again, do another hour or 2 at 8. I don't know. So we went back to her and said, you know, you can definitely go part-time, that's no problem, but you can also stay full-time. And even if you want to do a few hours on a Saturday to make up, you know, it's up to you how you manage your week. We are not worried. And she stayed full-time, and actually worked even better, because actually she does a little bit in the evening. So of course, when the team come in on the morning, she's done a bit of a mopping up at the end of the day, which suits them brilliantly. So I would say we're even more productive as a result of that change. I just don't know why we can't do more of that.
So it's very refreshing.
to link it to the job that I had after I had my first child. So this is going back 16 years. It was in Canary Wharf. I, you know, asked to work part-time. What was created was 4 days a week in the office. It was, you know, an hour's commute. You had to allow it for it to be an hour and a quarter. And, you know, nursery hours were only 8 till 6 at home. So, you know, the earliest I could get into the office was just after 9. And I had to leave the office at 4:45 in order to get there before the nursery was shut, and you would get berated and fined and, you know, risk of expulsion if you were running late or stuff was happening on trains and things. So by definition, regardless of this, you know, had a relatively, you know, senior role, but I was arriving late, departing early. You know, any work that I did outside of that wasn't visible. And so I felt that I wasn't doing my job as well as I could have been. And I was a, you know, bad mum because I was always the last, and, you know, I was never actually sort of feeding, you know, your own food. It was, you know, every meal was a nursery meal, and, you know, was getting back just in time for, you know, bath and bed. And I didn't feel that I was doing any of those roles well. But I completely agree. If you can take out the commute and increase the flexible working, and I think whilst the pandemic has created definitely short-term negatives, I'm hoping they're short-term and not short to medium, but I'm hoping sort of medium to long-term, they've actually created this new acceptance of flexible working that will be a real enabler for the balance of you know, work and family life. Because, you know, to use that point again of nursery hours and how constraining they were, oh my God, once you get to, you know, starting primary school, and, you know, for the first 3 weeks they're doing a half day and got to be picked up at 12, and then the next 3 weeks they're going to do, you know, 1 till 2, and then you need to pick up at 2:45. You know, the whole school construct is not designed for you know, for working parents.
And
there's an inbuilt assumption that
most families these days,
parents, and, you know, predominantly the female is, you know, the mother is at home and available at a moment's notice for whatever the, you know, cake cutting ceremony is.
With Harvest Festival coming up next week, I fully agree. I fully agree with that. But I mean, in terms of, we've both spoken about the pandemic, where do you think 5 to 10 years we could be if we get it right now? What do you think the kind of the gender norms would be then?
I'm very much hoping that it's, you know, it's quite different for men and women. So, you know, I think it's enabling women to, you know, particularly have, you know, more senior roles with higher commitments is not just about the women, it's about the whole sport environment. And I'm super fortunate to have a supportive husband that's sort of able to pick up the strain, because, you know, outside the pandemic, I do a lot of travel. I'm opening offices and going to conferences in different parts of the world. And, you know, that just doesn't work without a support infrastructure. And so I've been really lucky with my husband that, you know, I took a period of time out and then we've done a full swap. And, you know, currently, you know, he's picking up the slack on the you know, the school drop-offs and after school activities, etc. And without that, my job would be, it would be almost impossible to do. So it has to be that, you know, all jobs become flexible, not just jobs for women become flexible. You know, the opportunity for you know, secondments or you know, extended leave or you know, paternity leave, all these kind of things. It's really important to get right. And I think we only need to look at what's been achieved in the Nordics for some, you know, really good examples. And if we can get closer to that model, both in terms of the child support, the cost of child support, the sort of the before and after school clubs, and the, you know, the structures that are put in place for men and women, and the normalization of a man being at pickup is fine, and, you know, a dad going to a mum to arrange a play date is not seen to be odd. You know, all of these things need to be normalized for the whole thing to work for the long term.
Excellent. And Sam, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Joanna there. It's got to be equalised for both, because that will mean that men who want to take more of an active role in the home life can, which, if you prevent them from doing that, then you are also preventing from women being able to do more in the work. So it's it's passing ships in the night. You've got to swap them around a bit, and that will help the balance. But I think the other thing we've got to acknowledge, or I think for some of the listeners, I think we've got to acknowledge, is that I think you have to work out for you personally what you're willing to give on and what you're not. And I think you can't underestimate that. I think there isn't anything in life that doesn't come with compromise. And so it is a little bit about where are you willing to compromise and where aren't you willing to compromise. That doesn't mean that you can't achieve what you want to achieve. It just might mean that it might not mean it's in asset management. It might mean it's in the advice world or the wealth sector. So I think you've got to be a little bit, I call it boxing clever. So, you want to think about what's really important to you, which maybe it is picking the children up at 3 o'clock every day, or maybe it's you're a top sports person and you're not going to give that up. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is, in my opinion, because it's all about enjoying the journey in life. Because I think if you enjoy the journey in life, I think you can achieve great things. So I think you've got to stay incredibly positive and forward-looking and energized to achieve great things. So therefore, you've got to somehow create that in your life. If you end up being very, how do I put it, like pedestrian, going from one chaotic moment to another, it's very wearing. So I think you've got to be realistic. You can't live your life like that. I don't think that's the way to live your life. So you've got to think, right, take a step back. What am I compromising on? What am I not? And therefore, where might that work or suit? And if it isn't this bit here at the moment, for rightly or wrongly, head over here, make it happen over here. But I think that's probably the bit of advice I try and give to people. It's not perfect yet. So let's hope in 5-10 years, more sectors, more companies have opened up. But while perhaps you find some blockers, don't just keep hitting your head against a brick wall. Move, go do something else, but make it happen. I think it is possible.
That's some really good insights there, and both of you, it's been lovely kind of sharing your experiences. Just to maybe finally end on some advice, what advice would you give to women looking to further their career in fintech right now? Sam, we'll go back to you.
So my word of advice is be more feisty. I mean, I look at the difference that I see, and I think women have got to be more daring, ask for more, want more, and expect more from their line managers, from the people of them, because the male people, that when you look at where they get to, they don't get there because they don't ask and they don't push. So I think that's my one word of kind of thing is, and it's quite difficult. I think it isn't always that easy to do, but I think just remember, you've got absolutely nothing to lose and a lot to gain.
Excellent. And Jo?
It's something I speak about as well, but I add to that by likening it to sailing into the wind. And actually, you need to, in order to sort of go in a particular direction, you need to tap back and forth. And so sometimes you need to behave in exactly the way you say in order to, to get what you deserve, quite frankly. But we need to sort of temper that with, not losing who you actually are, and sort of tacking back the other way, such that we can sort of drop the ladder down for others and make it easier to and make voices more readily heard, regardless of how others are speaking. So that shouldn't have to be one form of behaviour in order to be heard. There often is at the moment, and sometimes we need to have that voice in order to be heard. At the same time, we need to be able to use our influence when we are around the table to be able to get other voices heard.
Excellent. Well, it's been lovely to hear from you both today, and thank you so much for joining me. And I hope we can talk about this again soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.